In the opening months of 1942, as the last defensive lines on Bataan buckled and the fortress island of Corregidor braced for the inevitable, a little-known order circulated quietly through the sinking structure of the U.S. Navy's Asiatic Fleet. A handful of naval intelligence officers and cryptologic specialists, men trained not for infantry combat but for the patient work of observation, signal interception, and covert reporting, were instructed not to evacuate with the rest of the garrison. Instead, they were to melt into the archipelago itself. For decades, these stay-behind missions would appear only as vague references in declassified papers, their operational details scattered across incomplete logs and faded carbon copies. But in early 1942, these men knew only one thing: their survival depended on silence. The struggle for the Philippines had reached its turning point. The Japanese 14th Army had swept across Luzon, seizing airfields, ports, and supply lines with alarming speed. Communications between American headquarters on Corregidor and field units grew sporadic as Japanese radio jamming intensified. Navy intelligence officers, primarily from the Office of Naval Intelligence (ONI), and several small detachments of the Asiatic Fleet, recognized that once the archipelago fell, the Allies would be blind. Without eyes along the Philippine coasts, the Navy would lose track of Japanese convoys moving toward the Dutch East Indies and the rest of the Southwest Pacific. Among those asked to remain was Lieutenant Arthur Vincent, a 29-year-old signals officer assigned to Cavite Naval Yard before it was destroyed in December 1941. His diary, recovered years later, captured the emotional weight of the directive: "Retreat for all hands is tomorrow. But not for us. We are told the fleet will need what we can hear. No uniforms. No rank. The islands will decide if we live." Vincent and others like him formed the backbone of a covert program designed to continue monitoring Japanese naval traffic long after formal American resistance collapsed. Their mission was deceptively simple on paper: establish small, concealed coastal watch posts across Luzon and the Visayas, intercept radio chatter from Japanese naval units, observe troop movements along major routes, and, when possible, pass information to remaining Allied forces via hidden transmitters. In practice, it meant blending into remote fishing villages, relying on the goodwill of local communities, and avoiding Japanese patrols that had orders to eliminate enemy stragglers on sight. One of the most strategically critical areas was the coastline of northern Luzon, near the town of Apari. Japanese supply ships frequently used the route connecting Formosa to their newly captured airfields. A team of 3 Navy intelligence men, assisted by local fishermen, set up a listening post deep within a grove of mangroves. Using a modified Hallicrafter's shortwave receiver fitted into a wooden crate disguised as fishing storage, they monitored coded naval transmissions at night. To avoid detection, they powered their equipment using hand-cranked generators that could be hidden seconds after use. But their greatest challenge was communication. Corregidor's primary transmitter was constantly targeted by Japanese bombardment, and each outgoing signal risked triangulation. The intelligence teams compensated by using burst transmissions, short, rapid bursts of coded Morse lasting less than 10 seconds. Even so, they knew each message could reveal their location. Many reports never reached their intended recipients, their fate sealed either by Japanese jamming or the simple fact that the men sending them were forced to flee mid-transmission. Historical notes from ONI reveal the chaotic nature of these weeks. Commanding officers struggled to track who had remained behind and where they had hidden. Some operatives crossed paths with retreating U.S. Army units, who had no idea that Navy intelligence men were even operating in the area. One internal memo dated March 1942 tersely stated, "Field reports conflicting. Unknown number of naval observers assumed active. Communication irregular." Even among high command, uncertainty dominated. The deeper mystery surrounding these missions stems from the incomplete archival record they left behind. After the war, only fragments were recovered: a map marked with coded coastal positions, a handful of decrypted Japanese signals annotated with the initials of unknown operators, and diary entries like Vincent's that hinted at intelligence successes never officially catalogued. Some historians have suggested that the secrecy surrounding these operations was so strict that even surviving participants were discouraged from documenting their work. Yet their contribution mattered. Reports from these hidden posts provided the earliest warnings of Japanese supply buildups before the assaults on Bataan and Corregidor. They helped shape the submarine infiltration missions that would follow. And for several months after the conventional defense collapsed, they were the last American presence gathering intelligence inside the archipelago. But as Japanese patrols expanded across Luzon in mid-1942, many of these teams were forced to relocate deeper into the interior. Some linked with emerging guerrilla groups, others simply disappeared from the record. Whether they were captured, absorbed into resistance networks, or continued their work without ever resurfacing is a question that still lingers. And as the Japanese tightened their grip on the islands, a new phase of the covert war began, one that would move from hidden huts on the coastline to the shadowy world of submarine insertion and rescue missions, setting the stage for the next chapter in this story. By late 1942, while the Japanese Empire tightened its hold on the Philippines, a different kind of lifeline began threading its way through the Pacific, one hidden beneath the waves. American submarines, once tasked solely with targeting Japanese shipping, were quietly reassigned to a mission so sensitive it rarely appeared in formal patrol reports. Boats such as USS Gudgeon SS-211, USS Trout SS-202, and later the large V-boats Narwhal and Nautilus became the only vessels capable of slipping past Japan's expanding naval cordon. Their objective was simple but forbidden under existing directives: resupply units that technically no longer existed and insert operatives whose missions officially did not occur. The struggle began with geography. The Philippine archipelago, more than 7,000 islands, coves, and reefs, was ideal for guerrilla warfare, but it was equally ideal for ambushes. Japanese forces had established coastal lookout stations equipped with searchlights and listening gear. Their patrol craft prowled the waters between Luzon, Panay, Negros, and Mindanao. Any submarine approaching too close to shore risked grounding in shallow channels or revealing itself to aircraft sweeping overhead at dawn. Yet American commanders, desperate for intelligence, pushed forward. The earliest missions centered on Negros and Panay, where local Filipino forces had begun reorganizing under leaders such as Lieutenant Colonel Macario Peralta Jr. and Major Jesus Villamor. They required supplies, rifles, medicine, batteries, and radios, and, just as importantly, trained American operatives to coordinate communication with Southwest Pacific Command. USS Gudgeon, still early in her wartime career, became one of the first to attempt these clandestine deliveries. A patrol report dated December 1942 includes a brief entry: approached Western Negros after dark. No signal from shore party. Landed small stores via rubber boat. Departed area under threat of aircraft sweep. The phrasing is startlingly vague. Later accounts from guerrilla fighters in Negros confirmed that not all landings succeeded. Some shore teams arrived at empty beaches, unsure whether guerrilla contacts had been intercepted or forced to scatter. Others waited hours in silence, listening for the coded whistle meant to signal a safe approach. The human burden of these missions is best understood through the experience of radioman First Class Henry Hank Lawson of the Trout. A surviving letter he wrote months later described a night landing on Panay. We rode into a darkness thicker than ink. No fires. No voices. Just the surf. The skipper said to leave the crates anyway. We felt watched the whole time by who no one could tell. That landing was later listed as unverified, an intelligence term used when both the submarine crew and shore guerrillas could not confirm the other's presence. As the tempo of these operations increased, so did the mystery surrounding them. Officially, most submarines were not supposed to conduct personnel insertions or resupply without explicit authorization from higher command. Admiral Thomas C. Hart, who had led the Asiatic Fleet, had once opposed using submarines in this risky manner, arguing it diverted them from their primary mission: sinking Japanese shipping. But the intelligence vacuum created by the fall of the Philippines forced new priorities. Some submarine captains quietly conducted resupply drops without full documentation, believing the survival of the guerrilla movement depended on swift action rather than bureaucratic clarity. This improvisational approach left gaps historians still struggle to fill. Certain landing sites mentioned in guerrilla memoirs do not appear in Navy logs. Some logs mention coded rendezvous points for which no guerrilla records exist. In a handful of cases, the same mission appears to be described differently by American and Filipino sources, suggesting that either errors occurred in the dark chaos of night operations or that some teams never made it to their extraction or supply points. One such case involves a gudgeon landing near Mindanao in early 1943. Guerrilla fighter accounts describe hearing distant engine noise offshore, likely a submarine surfacing, but seeing no landing craft. Days later, they found a crate of medical supplies washed up on a beach miles from the rendezvous site. Whether the crew had attempted a landing and aborted under threat or had simply jettisoned the cargo to avoid detection is unknown. The event does not appear in Gudgeon's patrol report for that period. The modern lesson in these clandestine missions lies in their fragility. Submarine warfare is often portrayed as a battle of torpedoes and tonnage sunk, but in the Philippines, it also became a thread of hope running through an occupied nation. These missions required trust between strangers meeting in complete darkness, sailors who had never set foot on the island and guerrillas who risked execution for any contact with Americans. Their coordination relied on coded signals, improvised lantern flashes, and faith that both sides were still alive. But the uncertainty of the sea and the secrecy of the mission meant some personnel never returned. A few operatives inserted during this period vanished entirely, lost in transit, captured, or absorbed into guerrilla units without leaving clear records. Their names appear only in fragmentary notes, initials, radio call signs, or references to agents landed, no further report. And as 1943 approached, intelligence needs increased. The Navy began seeking not just to supply the guerrillas but to coordinate with them more directly, to intercept Japanese communications from deep inside the archipelago. This stage would bring the submarine missions into contact with new, more dangerous forms of intelligence work, setting the stage for a disappearance that would puzzle historians for decades. By 1943, the clandestine war inside the Philippines had evolved into something far more complex than submarine resupply and nighttime rendezvous. A deeper intelligence network was forming, one built on scratch-built radios, hidden hilltop antennas, and the cooperation of disparate guerrilla groups spread across Mindanao's rugged interior. What began as survival-driven resistance was turning into a coordinated effort capable of tracking Japanese troop movements and convoy patterns with astonishing precision. And at the center of this expanding web stood Colonel Wendell Fertig, a former mining engineer turned unlikely commander, and a rotating cadre of U.S. Navy intelligence operatives quietly inserted to help him. It was during this period that one of the war's most puzzling disappearances occurred, the unexplained vanishing of a three-man Navy radio intercept team operating near Misamis Oriental. The struggle for Mindanao was unlike that of Luzon. Its terrain was a maze of jungles, mountains, and rivers that swallowed entire battalions and preserved pockets of American and Filipino resistance long after organized defense had collapsed on Bataan. Japanese forces, spread thin across the island, relied heavily on coordinated naval convoys moving reinforcements and supplies from Cebu and Davao. To predict these movements, Fertig's headquarters required an intelligence capability more advanced than simple visual observation. This gap was filled by ONI specialists equipped with portable intercept sets capable of receiving mid-frequency naval broadcasts, technology rare in the field and dangerously valuable to the enemy. One such team consisted of Chief Radioman Samuel Sam O'Donnell, Seaman First Class Peter Ramos, and Lieutenant J.G. Harold Branning, a cryptologic trainee. Inserted by the submarine USS Nautilus in late March 1943, they carried a Type 3 Mark II intercept receiver, collapsible antenna, a field cipher kit, and a waterproof packet of ONI instructions. Their orders were precise: establish a listening post somewhere between Jinggoog Bay and the foothills of Mount Balatucan, coordinate with Fertig's headquarters, and intercept Japanese naval signals moving through the Bohol Sea. It was a mission that demanded both invisibility and unbroken discipline. The team's struggle began the moment they came ashore. Japanese patrols were expanding inland in search of guerrilla concentrations, and local civilians were under increasing threat of reprisals. A guerrilla escort guided the team to a concealed ridge overlooking the coastline, where they established their post beneath layers of palm thatch and foliage. They operated at night, stretching a narrow antenna between two trees, tuning the receiver to frequencies known to be used by the Davao-based Japanese 32nd Naval Special Base Force. Radio logs recovered later show a pattern in their early reports: short intercepts of Japanese landing craft movements, coded references to convoy formations, and brief notes on increased radio chatter preceding troop movements. One decrypt from early April mentions multiple vessels, northbound, estimated departure from Cebu. Days later, guerrillas confirmed heightened Japanese activity across northern Mindanao, suggesting the team's intercept had been accurate. But the secrecy of their work isolated them. They communicated through burst transmissions directed to a separate relay station run by Fertig's men. They rarely interacted with nearby villages, knowing that even accidental discovery could compromise the entire network. And they operated with limited supplies. Chief O'Donnell once wrote in a field note, "Battery power down to 3 days. Scrambling for dry cell replacements. Locals afraid to help, Japanese too close." It was a sign that the perimeter around them was tightening. The reveal came in mid-May 1943. At 0320 hours, a burst transmission was received at Fertig's relay. It was incomplete but chilling in its brevity: large movement, multiple convoys east of. The signal cut abruptly. Operators attempted contact again and again, but no reply came. The disappearance of O'Donnell's team sparked immediate speculation among guerrilla leaders. Some believed Japanese forces had triangulated the signal and closed in on the ridge. Others argued the team may have attempted relocation toward the interior and been ambushed along forest trails known to be patrolled by Kempeitai units. A smaller group of Fertig's officers suspected something stranger, that the team may have intercepted something too critical, perhaps a convoy intended for a larger Japanese operation, prompting an unusually rapid response. But no concrete evidence emerged. Weeks later, a field runner reported finding pieces of burned equipment near a remote gully south of Jinguk. Among the debris was a fragment of a radio chassis consistent with the Mark II intercept set used by the team. But there were no human remains, no dog tags, no papers. Whether the site had been destroyed by the Japanese or intentionally burned by the operatives themselves remains unknown. The modern reflection on this event underscores the vulnerability of intelligence operations conducted deep behind enemy lines. Unlike submarine crews or infantry units, these three men operated without reinforcement, without clear extraction plans, and without the certainty that their messages were even reaching their superiors. Their mission was designed to illuminate enemy movements, yet their own fate remained shrouded in darkness, a paradox common in wartime espionage. What is certain is that their final transmission had an impact. In the days following the incomplete report, Fertig ordered a series of guerrilla alerts along Mindanao's north coast, likely preventing several units from being caught off guard by Japanese troop movements. As 1943 progressed, such intelligence would become even more essential. Submarine missions increased, airstrikes intensified, and the Navy would soon begin planning extraction operations for downed pilots and informants. These new efforts would bring American forces back toward Luzon's dangerous coastlines, and toward another set of operations that would end in confusion, fractured records, and unanswered questions. By early 1944, as the balance in the Pacific finally tilted against Japan, the U.S. Navy began orchestrating a series of covert extraction missions that remain some of the most daring and least understood operations of the entire Philippine campaign. These missions, designed to rescue downed aviators, retrieve high-value informants, and insert new intelligence teams, were carried out under cover of total radio silence along the most dangerous coastlines of Luzon. The submarines USS Narwhal and USS Nautilus, massive pre-war vessels with cavernous storage holds, became the unexpected workhorses of these clandestine actions. And it was during one of these operations in the shadowed waters off eastern Luzon that a sequence of events unfolded which later left investigators with more questions than answers. The hook lies in a curious entry found in Narwhal's patrol report for February 1944. Amid the expected notes about depth soundings and Japanese patrol boat sightings, a single line stands out: secondary extraction point abandoned, shore party status unknown. The phrasing is clinical, almost evasive, and it provides only the faintest glimpse of a mission that had been highly classified even among submarine crews. The struggle began weeks earlier. Intelligence coming from guerrilla units in the Sierra Madre Mountains indicated that several American survivors, including pilots shot down during raids on Japanese airfields, were hiding among remote coastal villages. One survivor, Ensign Robert Kellum of VF-6, was believed to possess first-hand observations of new Japanese aircraft dispersal patterns near Tuguegarao. Another survivor, a communications specialist named Robert Salinas, carried memorized encryption notes vital to upcoming U.S. Navy operations. These men needed extraction and fast. Japanese patrols were increasing, and in several villages, locals were already being questioned under threat of reprisal. The USS Narwhal, under the command of Lieutenant Commander Frank Latta, was assigned the mission. Capable of carrying large teams and cargo, Narwhal had already made several successful landings in Mindanao and Negros. But Luzon was different. The Japanese presence was heavier, the coastline narrower, and the sea lanes more aggressively patrolled. The Navy's Office of Strategic Services, OSS, and ONI jointly planned a two-point extraction, the primary landing at a secluded cove near Baylor, and a secondary rendezvous farther north for another small group believed to be carrying intelligence documents. As the date approached, tensions rose on both sides of the operation. Guerrilla messages indicated Japanese Kempeitai units had been spotted north of the primary extraction zone. Radio traffic intercepted by American operatives hinted at unusual Japanese naval coordination in the area, more patrol boats, more checkpoints, more night sweeps. Whether by coincidence or intelligence leak, the coastline had become unexpectedly active. The reveal came on the night of February 22, 1944. Narwhal surfaced under extremely dark conditions, riding low to reduce her silhouette. Latta cautiously maneuvered toward the primary extraction site. 2 rubber boats were sent ashore, crewed by volunteers familiar with covert landings. They found the survivors waiting, hungry, exhausted but alive. Guerrilla escorts reported that Japanese patrols had swung through the area only hours earlier. The extraction was swift. Within 40 minutes, all personnel were aboard. Then came the signal for the second rendezvous, 3 short flashes from a shuttered lantern. But before Narwhal could reposition, the sonar operator detected engine noise, multiple contacts approaching from the north. Japanese subchasers or picket boats. Latta made a rapid decision: abort the secondary landing. Before diving, he ordered a final sweep of the shoreline through binoculars. No lights. No movement. Just the sound of distant surf and the shape of the mountains against the sky. What happened to the second shore party remains one of the unresolved puzzles of these missions. Guerrilla records from Luzon's east coast are sparse for that period, but hints surface in 2 surviving accounts. A villager from Dipaculo later claimed that 3 Americans and several Filipino guides were seen heading inland the night of the scheduled extraction, carrying a wooden radio crate and what appeared to be a sealed envelope. Another wartime diary from a guerrilla lieutenant mentions a failed pickup involving men carrying naval papers, but the entry is undated and lacks names. No definitive trace of the group, not uniforms, equipment, nor documents, was found after liberation. Modern analysts speculate several possibilities. The men may have attempted to travel south toward friendlier guerrilla zones and become lost or ambushed along the way. They may have been intercepted by Japanese patrols conducting sweeps near the coast. Some historians believe they may have destroyed their materials and attempted to blend into the population, hoping for a later extraction that never came. The application for today is clear. These missions illustrate a timeless truth about intelligence work. Timing, terrain, and uncertainty shape the outcome as much as planning or courage. Decisions made in moments of danger ripple outward for years, even decades. As Narwhal slipped beneath the surface that night, carrying rescued airmen and critical intelligence, the unanswered fate of the second party hung heavily over the crew. But there was no time to dwell on mysteries. Larger operations were already forming in the Pacific, operations that required precise knowledge of Japanese defenses. And soon, the U.S. Navy would send scouts into the heart of the Surigao Strait, where another mission would produce evidence both invaluable and incompletely understood. By mid-1944, as the Allies prepared for the decisive return to the Philippines, the U.S. Navy's appetite for intelligence became insatiable. The upcoming Leyte operations required precise knowledge of Japanese defenses in the Surigao Strait, a labyrinth of islands, coves, and narrow channels where even a single miscalculation could cost thousands of lives. But naval commanders faced a critical problem. Most pre-war charts were outdated, and Japanese engineers had spent nearly 2 years reinforcing the region with concealed artillery emplacements and coastal radar. The Navy needed fresh reconnaissance, but aerial photography could not penetrate the dense coastal foliage. Thus began a series of clandestine infiltration missions carried out by small hand-picked teams of Navy scouts and guerrilla guides. One of these teams produced a field notebook retrieved months later, that would become both a vital source of intelligence and one of the most enigmatic artifacts of the campaign. The struggle for the Surigao Strait was rooted in geography. The narrow waters between Leyte and Mindanao formed a natural gateway to the Central Archipelago, and whoever controlled this passage controlled the routes used by both Japanese supply convoys and Allied invasion forces. In early September 1944, Admiral Thomas Kinkaid's 7th Fleet began preparing to sweep the region clean of enemy forces. Yet reports from guerrilla units in southern Leyte suggested that Japanese troops had fortified entire ridgelines, concealed artillery under tree cover, and mined several channels. These claims needed verification. The mission was too dangerous for conventional marine reconnaissance. Instead, the Navy dispatched small clandestine teams equipped with compasses, compact radios, and sketching materials, tools more common to surveyors than soldiers. One such team, operating under the informal designation Scout Detachment Echo, consisted of 3 U.S. Navy petty officers, 2 Filipino guerrillas from the 93rd Division, and a civilian fisherman serving as a local navigator. Their orders were straightforward but perilous. Land on a small islet south of Penon Island, map any Japanese artillery positions or lookout stations, and confirm the presence of heavy guns rumored to be hidden along the Surigao coast. Their equipment included field binoculars, a compact Fairchild rangefinder, and a red-covered notebook used for logging sketches and coordinates. The landing occurred in late September under cover of darkness. Japanese patrols were active around the strait, and several barges were known to run nightly between Lilloan and San Francisco. The team paddled ashore in silence, dragging their collapsible boat into mangroves before ascending a steep trail that wound up a ridgeline overlooking the water. From this vantage point, they could see distant signal lights on Japanese positions, brief flashes that hinted at coordinated movements, but not enough to reveal precise locations. The scouts worked for days, moving between observation points while evading patrols. Guerrilla fighters later testified that the Japanese presence was heavier than expected, with roving squads patrolling the uplands at irregular intervals. On one occasion, the team was forced to hide for nearly 9 hours in a limestone crevice as a patrol passed within meters of their position. Despite the danger, they managed to complete several sketches of possible gun placements, noting peculiar clearings and unusual patterns of tree cover that suggested camouflaged fortifications. The reveal came when the team's notebook was eventually recovered. It contained rough sketches of the coastline, estimated ranges, shaded contours of suspected artillery nests, and coded notes referencing Japanese supply barges. But several pages appeared torn out, cleanly, deliberately, and the remaining sketches hinted at a larger defensive network not fully described in the surviving report. A cryptic notation on one page read, "Ridge 4, double line, movement at dusk, possible radio mast?" No such mast was ever confirmed by subsequent reconnaissance, and no page describing Ridge 4 in detail was found. What happened during the team's final days remains partially unclear. According to guerrilla accounts, the unit attempted to relocate north after spotting unusual nighttime signaling between two hidden coves, likely Japanese communications using shuttered lanterns. But at some point during their movement they encountered a Japanese patrol. A brief exchange of gunfire ensued. The team split, with the American petty officers attempting to protect the notebook while the others created a diversion. Only one scout and one guerrilla fighter returned to friendly lines days later, exhausted and badly dehydrated. They carried the red notebook, the only intact record of the mission. The rest of the team was never found. The notebook's incomplete status has fueled questions among historians. Were the missing pages torn out to protect sensitive information? Were they lost during the firefight? Or did they contain reconnaissance details that the surviving scouts deliberately destroyed to prevent them from falling into enemy hands? The surviving pages themselves show signs of water damage and hurried erasures, some overwritten multiple times in different pencil strokes, suggesting a rushed final revision under duress. The application for modern readers is unmistakable. Reconnaissance is not merely observation but interpretation. The scouts had seconds to judge whether a shadowed break in tree cover was an artillery pit or a trick of light, whether a distant flicker was a lantern or a reflection off wave-washed rock. Their imperfect but courageous work provided the Navy with enough data to adjust the preliminary bombardment plans for the Leyte landings, reducing casualties along key beachheads. Yet the incomplete nature of the notebook leaves room for speculation. Had the missing pages survived, they might have provided detailed diagrams of additional Japanese emplacements or revealed patterns in the covert signaling observed along the strait. Instead, they remain a silent void in the historical record, one more reminder of the intelligence fragments on which massive wartime operations often relied. And as the Leyte invasion neared, these reconnaissance puzzles would give way to an even larger intelligence effort, the final compilation of all clandestine missions across the archipelago, an audit that would reveal just how many operatives remained unaccounted for as the war drew to a close. As 1945 dawned, the tide of war in the Pacific had unmistakably turned. American forces had reclaimed Leyte, and the long-awaited push into Luzon was underway. With each liberated town, fragments of intelligence, lost radio transmissions, coded notes, half-burned field orders, were recovered and sent back to the Office of Naval Intelligence for consolidation. It was a monumental effort, a final wartime audit of every clandestine operation conducted in the Philippines since 1942. Hundreds of handwritten reports, submarine patrol logs, guerrilla diaries, and personal letters sifted together to form a picture of the Navy's hidden war. And yet, amid all this new clarity, something unsettling emerged. Several operations, including the stay-behind missions, submarine landings, and reconnaissance runs, were officially categorized as no further data. It was a bureaucratic phrase masking real human mysteries. Men who vanished, transmissions that ended abruptly, and missions whose outcomes remained permanently unresolved. The hook lies in a little-known ONI document dated March 1945, Status of Field Operatives Incomplete Manifest. It listed, without commentary, names and code numbers of personnel believed to have operated behind enemy lines but whose missions had never returned comprehensive reports. Some of these names corresponded to known missing teams such as the Mindanao Intercept Unit. Others were linked to lesser-known missions that left only scattered references in submarine logs and guerrilla statements. The war was ending, but the paper trail exposed a deeper truth. The Navy's intelligence network in the archipelago had expanded rapidly and often improvisationally, faster than the documentation could keep up. The struggle to account for every operative reflected the chaotic nature of liberation. As American forces advanced, guerrilla units, many of which had operated autonomously for years, flooded headquarters with intelligence. Some arrived with detailed notebooks. Others carried scraps of paper or verbal reports passed down through multiple intermediaries. Many guerrilla commanders had kept their cell structures intentionally compartmentalized to prevent Japanese penetration, meaning even they sometimes lacked full knowledge of the American personnel embedded in remote districts. Adding to the challenge, some operatives had worked undercover so deeply that they were known only by aliases or numerical designations. One WWII field officer, Lieutenant Marcus Henderson, described the situation in a memorandum. "The record we now construct is not a ledger of complete events. It is a mosaic of fragments, radio bursts, intercepted notes, half-remembered names from villagers, submarine deck log annotations." His words captured the sense of both accomplishment and loss felt by investigators. The reveal came when survivors of various clandestine missions returned from the field. Some had escaped Japanese patrols with the help of local families. Others had spent months moving between guerrilla units. A few had lived in hiding after their radios failed or their extraction points were compromised. Their accounts filled in critical context. Japanese sweeps that had gone unreported, last-minute changes in rendezvous points, emergency signal codes never recorded in official documents. But even with these first-hand testimonies, several missions remained opaque. For example, a previously unknown two-man Navy reconnaissance pair, believed to have operated on the western coast of Mindoro, appeared only in guerrilla records, no submarine manifests or WWII files acknowledged inserting them. Another case involved a coded message received by a coastwatcher station in 1943 referencing "Package 2 delivered," a phrase not found in any American operational plan. Whether the message referred to supplies, intelligence documents, or personnel remains uncertain. The no further data classification appeared repeatedly as analysts reviewed operations from 1942 to 1944. It became a symbol of wartime ambiguity, missions that had taken place under duress, recorded hastily, if at all. In several instances, the designation likely masked the deaths of operatives whose remains were never found. In others, it may have reflected deliberate caution. Sensitive details withheld even from after-action reports to protect local collaborators who continued to live in vulnerable regions. The modern reflection is profound. War histories often emphasize the large-scale battles, the landings, naval engagements, and sweeping offensives, but the intelligence war in the Philippines was conducted by small, isolated groups whose stories were easily lost in the chaos. Their successes, such as early warnings of Japanese convoy movements, identification of airfield expansions, and reconnaissance of coastal defenses, contributed significantly to the broader campaign. Yet the details of their work were often swallowed by jungle, ocean, and secrecy. As the war concluded in August 1945, the Navy compiled a final volume cataloging clandestine efforts in the Southwest Pacific. Portions were classified for decades. Declassified fragments reveal courage, ingenuity, and sacrifice, but also gaps, pages marked with blacked-out names, incomplete mission summaries, and references to personnel whose fate lines ended abruptly. A historian reviewing the files in the 1970s wrote, "These operations exist in the shadows between documentation and rumor. Their traces are faint, but their impact was real." In the closing scene of this hidden war, American intelligence officers stood on Philippine soil finally liberated, aware that not every operative would be coming home and not every story would be fully understood. The remnants of their missions, charred radio components, half-filled notebooks, cryptic diary entries, remained scattered across an archipelago that had seen some of the most dangerous intelligence battles of the Pacific. And even today, the classified notations, the missing reports, and the unresolved disappearances continue to echo across the historical record. Persistent reminders that the victory in the Philippines was shaped not only by the armies who fought in the open, but also by the Navy personnel who risked everything in silence, leaving behind mysteries that time has only partially uncovered.